So Kristin, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. I'm very short, so that's very high. Hi, everybody. I'm Kristin Wilson. I'm from Florida, and I'm going to tell you how to create your digital nomad relocation plan. But before that, we're finally here. I feel like this has been coming. We've been waiting for it with bated breath for so long now. So I just want everybody to take a moment and just pat yourselves on the back for coming out here. Good, don't be afraid. Yeah. So yesterday we were actually, we practiced with the other speakers, and I can say that every single speaker here who's been doing this for many years, no matter what we're doing, we all had one thing in common, and that is that we all wish that we had this information when we started our journeys 5, 10, or even 20 years ago. So you guys are getting a lot of information that I only wish I had back in the early 2000s. So I'm going to just go out on a limb and assume, how many people here like to travel like me? Is it all of us? Yeah, okay. Well, you're going to get your money's worth because we're going to start with a little time traveling. How about that? You guys ready? Okay. So who remembers the year 2000 now? Okay, good. So Y2K. So I want you guys to just, I know it's early, but go ahead and close your eyes again and just imagine what you were doing in the year 2000. How old were you? Where were you living? Were you in school? Were you just a kid? Were you working? Because everyone remembers where they were during Y2K. It was the end of the world. Okay. Now open your eyes. So you probably, in the year 2000, were not anticipating that you would be in this room right now learning to become a digital nomad, right? So I myself was 17 years old. I was graduating from high school, and I was applying for a passport for the first time, about to learn how addicted I would become to travel. And I was waiting with a bit of anticipation and anxiety for the next year of my life, the first year of my adult life, of course, going off to college. And I'm sure you guys can all relate to like how stressful that can be at 17, 18 years old and not having a clue what you want to do. But the one thing I knew that I loved doing was traveling once I went on my first trip abroad that summer. And so I decided to major in international business. And by basically complete fluke, without which I probably would not be here today, I learned about international human resources management and the global mobility and relocation industry. So I want to go over a few words that I learned in the year 2000 that I had no idea existed. Because when I tell people what I do, a relocation manager or consultant, they're like, what's relocation? So let's take a look at some of the words with our Y2K friend here. So the first word, of course, relocation itself, it just basically means moving from one place to another. It can be domestically, it can be internationally. And then around the relocation industry, we have global mobility, which is a word probably no one's heard of. But there's a giant industry, multi-billion dollar industry around moving corporate employees and executives around the world. Expat is a term that we're going to talk about in a minute. It just means someone who's residing outside of their foreign country. Culture shock, cross-cultural awareness, and repatriation, which is going back to your home country. Telecommuting, tax domicile, which we're going to hear about today. And then, of course, remote workers and digital nomads. So these are all, well, digital nomad didn't even exist yet in the year 2000, but these are all words that I had never heard of when I entered into college. And all of those words, except digital nomad, are built to help this guy, who I call stock photo man, or corpo man. And I call him corpo man because most of the multinational executives who are getting moved to different countries for remote work assignments are in the top 0.1% of businessmen. You know, there are CEOs, CFOs, and they're going abroad for anywhere from a few months to a few years to run a global corporation. So I thought I would be helping CorpoMan, but instead I ended up taking a chance and moving to Nicaragua and Costa Rica in 2005. And I was faced with the daunting prospect of trying to relocate myself. So instead of becoming, getting on the track to climbing the corporate ladder to becoming an executive myself or helping corporate employees relocate, I decided to apply all of those words that I just told you to living in the jungle and in farms and basically being the opposite of what a multinational executive would live like. I was making $1,000 a month when I started. And, can't forget this. This is proof that even before Instagram, digital nomads were bragging about where they were working. I don't even think anyone saw that photo until like 10 years later. So yeah, international digital nomad relocation consultant. That's what I do now. But before there were digital nomads, what did we call these people who were living and working all around the world without the digital part? They were mostly referred to as expatriates. So this has typically been a word that has a negative connotation because it means to basically abandon one's home country. And these are people who were not your average Joe. And they fell into three main categories. Your retirees, so people who no longer had to work and they had some free time and disposable income and they finally wanted to start living their lives on their own terms at like 65 or whatever that may be. Then we had the vagabonds. So humans have always been inherently nomadic, right? Since our roots, since the beginning of time. But vagabonding, nomads were probably on the fringes of society and just kind of doing their own thing, marching to the beat of their own drum, and they may have been working or not working and just trying to get by. And then we have our corporate executives, of course, who were making a lot of money and had a huge team behind them helping make their international relocation a success. So these are some of the things that CorpoMan gets when he relocates. So they're already making a lot of money, right? If you're running a company, you're already making in 6 or 7 figures. So on top of your salary, just imagine if you guys had all of these things when you were starting your journey into becoming a digital nomad. A bonus or a salary increase, a relocation package worth sometimes up to 3 to 5 times your annual salary, a housing allowance, so you get to live for free, family and spousal support. So instead of trying to convince your family members that you're doing the right thing by becoming a digital nomad, you can just basically bring them with you and let them live for free with you as well. And then, of course, administrative and residency support, so you never have to worry about documentation or visas or any of that boring stuff. And then once you get to the country, you would begin the adaptation process of integrating into the normal life in that country. So they would receive cross-cultural training, free language classes, which are really expensive, and then repatriation assistance. So there's another one of those words. So when they would go back to their home country, they would have help with that too. And of course, they would have movers and packers, and they wouldn't have to worry about any of the logistics. So the main things, if you guys are coming to my workshop tomorrow on strategies for sustaining the digital nomad lifestyle, we'll talk a little bit about the reasons why digital nomads succeed and fail. And the two main factors are typically financial and also adaptation in the new country or destination. So we'll talk about that more in detail tomorrow. But if you guys had all of this stuff, do you think that it would be a bit easier for you to achieve the location-independent lifestyle? Yeah? Especially if you're a very smart and successful business person. Well, even with all of this, 10 to 80% of corporate executives and remote employees actually fail. And, good for them, wasting all of that money. So this means effectively that they leave their corporate assignment early not because they don't have money, but because they can't adapt and they can't hack it long term. So, I mean, things are looking pretty dire right now for you guys, for all of us, because how are you going to deal with everything that you have to do with the limited resources that you have, and then have a better chance at success compared to somebody who has an international human resources team behind them and all of this money? So never fear, because I'm going to help you with that. So here's just a example of some of the things that digital nomads and remote workers have to deal with, which is basically the complete opposite of our stock photo man. So instead of getting a lot of extra money, you typically have to take a pay cut. So you're either convincing your boss to let you work remotely, or you're running your own business. So you're probably bootstrapping and just responsible for a lot of stuff. And in addition to that, now you have to be your own travel agent in addition to your own CEO. So no pressure, right? Now you also have to, figure out your schedule and productivity, learn how to manage your team, work remotely, manage your business across the world, figure out how to register companies abroad, and basically do the job of an international human resources relocation team, but by yourself, on top of adjusting on a personal level as well to the lifestyle and to your new destination. And then you also need to take into consideration things like taxes and all the technical stuff, and then even the dynamics of maybe your coworkers or other people like family members who don't understand why you're going somewhere. So that's kind of, that's a lot to handle because, and sorry for the cliche hammock photo, but this is what we want, right? And the good news is we can actually have it. So we want it all. We want the leisurely lifestyle of the retiree who has nothing to do and is just hanging out on an island, but we don't want to wait until we're 65 to be able to do that. We want to have the freedom and the independence of the vagabond, but we don't want to be like backpacking our whole lives and bootstrapping. And we want the corporate or career success, the financial stability, et cetera, of the corporate executive without having to climb the corporate ladder or, wait for some big job title or promotion. So that's basically what the ideal digital nomad can have. All of the best parts of those avatars, so to speak, but without any of the negative sides. So let's talk about how we can flatten the learning curve and get there, right? So that you can be like this, but not get sand in your laptop. So most people spend months, if not years, reading and researching about how to become location independent and where they should go. And this, I made an unscientific graph of, how hard it is to become a digital nomad with quantum physics just for reference there. And this is what it feels like, right? And it's actually true because I've been doing this for more than a decade, and it's still, constantly a challenge in different ways as I get older, and all of my friends and clients feel the same. So we're going to flatten that learning curve so that you don't have to spend 3 or 4 years just contemplating how you're going to do this. You can just do it. So how to create your relocation plan. Now, I know everybody wants to know, what's the best place to go, right? Where should you go? Where should you move? What's the best place for digital nomads? What has the best cost of living, the best co-working? And my process actually completely flips that upside down because I firmly believe that the destination is the journey. And once you start doing this, I'm sure you guys know that you can never visit enough places. So it doesn't really matter where you end up going. It's about you and your journey and being able to apply this process to wherever you go. So I use this process not only for my clients and to teach you guys to help you out, but I also use it for myself. So it still works after over 1,000 relocations. So what's the first step if it's not where you're going? I like to do just a really basic freehand, like write down, old-fashioned pen and paper brainstorming session. And I put 7 questions here as examples, but there's actually over 100 different questions that I have as prompts that I can provide to Nomad Summit as resources. But everything such as like, what are your goals? What's your timeline? What is the nature of your business? What do you need to do your work? Where are your customers? Where are your clients? Where are your colleagues? And then personal things like, what type of environment do you want to live in? What type of weather do you want? Do you want to be around other nomads? So depending on what you're working on, maybe you need to network to get to where you're going next, or maybe you're doing a project like writing a book and you just want to be in a really quiet, isolated place. So these are all things to take into consideration. How often you'll be changing destinations, because I know some people like to move every week or every month, so you want to keep all of these things in mind. And then the infrastructure you need to do your job, of course. Like if you're writing a book, you might not need high-speed internet, but if you're uploading 4K videos to Google Drive, then you probably need to go there. So find a place with the best internet in the world. So we're going to be putting together all of these pieces so that when it comes time to pick a destination, you have something to go on that's unique to yourself. And the second part is designing your ideal days. So this is actually a really fun exercise. And maybe we can put this in the workshop tomorrow too. This is something I've been doing with my clients for about 7 years, and it's something that I've never met anyone who's tried it before, and I don't even remember how I started doing this, but I think it just made sense. When you go to college or high school, you learn a lot of different skills, but nobody ever asks you, what do you want your life to be like on a day-to-day basis? Because you don't have a choice, typically. It's just assumed that you're going to go get a 9-to-5 job, or you're going to go work in a workplace somewhere, and you don't need to think about this. And your time is limited, because by the time you commute to work and you're there all day, you don't have that much else you can do besides just try to keep up with your to-do list, right? So I like to start with your ideal workday and just go through from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep. If you could have your perfect workday, what would that even look like? So what time would you wake up? Would you have to get up at 4:30 to go to the gym if you didn't have to? Would you commute an hour and a half if you didn't have to? So think about everything from what time you would wake up, what even you would wear. Like, are you in a place where you're going to get up and go skiing that morning before work? Or are you putting on your flip-flops and going for a walk on the beach? What are you eat for breakfast? Are you working by yourself? Are you working with other people? Are you commuting? Are you making food at home? Do you like to go out to eat? Like, what time do you like to eat? It doesn't have to be on a lunch break. Like, just everything you can possibly think of, and just write it minute by minute, hour by hour. And then repeat that for your personal day. Because if, basically in your free time, you're limited to where you work and what you can do without getting on an airplane. So let's say that you live in the middle of North Carolina, and at 5 p.m. on Friday, you have like 48 hours left before you have to be back at work. So maybe you can drive to the beach for the day, maybe you can go to the mountains, maybe you're just gonna go out and maybe go to brunch hungover the next day, who knows what you can do. But if you weren't limited geographically, then what would you do on your ideal personal day? The world is your oyster. Maybe you would go to a museum. Maybe you would go surfing. So kind of repeat that process of your ideal, let's call it a Saturday or a Sunday, like a traditional weekend day. And this can give you a lot of insight so that when you get to the end of the process, you'll know what's clicking for you. And oh yeah, it's all fitting together. So here's where we start to put these steps together. So now you have your foundation of your brainstorm and all of your assessment results. You have your ideal personal day and your ideal work day. And now you have to look at the situational factors of the country. So, what time zone it's in and where you'll be working from and all of those resources and things that you need to be able to do your job. And then, of course, where you can go with your passport, right? So all of those sorts of things to start eliminating possible places. And then I also like to put wild cards because like we can just make it up as we go along, right? So you guys are here today. Maybe you need to be in Chiang Mai in January for the next Nomad Summit. So yeah, so you need to make sure that you're in Southeast Asia in like December or January so that you can get there. You don't want to be in like Patagonia. So think about like a concert you want to go to or an event or a workshop or anything fun that's on your bucket list. If you want to include it, just put that on your calendar. And I do that every year. I look at all sorts of things, meditation retreats, and I'm like, I definitely want to go to that. So I plan around it. And now we get to actually start considering destinations. So I put, like, does anyone know like what a SWOT analysis is? Any business people here? So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And each country can kind of have its own SWOT analysis that's based on your personal perception. So as Johnny mentioned, I work with a lot of poker players, and they have to move for tax or regulatory reasons. So there's a lot of countries in the world that are just completely off limits to them. But like Portugal, for example. But Portugal is a great place for digital nomads, but it doesn't work for poker players because they can't access the sites where they make money. So you can look at each country, let's say like your top 2 or 3 or 5 finalists, and you can actually do a SWOT analysis on each one and make sure it's going to work for you. So everything from entry visas, if you can even get in there. So I also have, like, for example, poker players from India that can't go to some countries because they can't get a visa. Or if they get a visa on arrival, they can only stay for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 1 month. So depending on where you're from, if you won the jackpot and you're born in like a first world country, then you can, maybe have more flexibility. But these are things to think about. Safety and security. There's certainly countries that are perceived dangerous that actually probably aren't, but depending on your risk tolerance, you want to look at the safety of each place. Then regions, geography, climate. There's a lot of nuances in one country throughout the year. So if you've ever been to Chiang Mai, have you guys been to Chiang Mai? I think a few of you, yeah. So if you're there in the burn season like I was, you're probably going to have a different experience than if you're there for Nomad Summit. You're just going to have a lot more fun if you're there at the right time of year. So you want to think about those sorts of things too. Rainy season, dry season, and what time of year you're going. And then pros and cons like tax implications and other things that you can think about because everyone loves a pros and cons list. And then finally, of course, your work environment. So what type of internet you need, what type of workplace that you need, and who you want to be around because community is obviously super important as well. So if you're out in the Swiss Alps on a mountain by yourself, then you want to make sure you're in the right place. So I did a couple examples here based on actual clients, and the names have been changed to protect the innocent and for alliteration purposes. So you can remember. First, we have Marco, who is moving to Malta today, actually, at 10:30 p.m. And he chose Malta because he lives in Germany, which doesn't have a good tax situation for him. So he didn't really want to move, but it was a good idea for him to move. And he likes to travel, and he chose Malta, and I had to add it here because apparently it's not big enough to make it on this map, but it's a real country down here. And he wanted to be close to his friends and family, so a short plane ride away from Germany, and he wanted to be around other poker players, and Malta is a hot spot for that. He likes nightlife and going out, and that's really good. There's a big pub culture in Malta, and he wanted to live in like a Mediterranean climate and have a mid-range cost of living. So Malta checked a lot of the boxes. And then Lauren, who's moving to London on Monday, she chose London because she is actually not quite a digital nomad, but she's a lawyer who's a remote worker. So she needed to be somewhere where her law firm had a base. So we were just able to look at Hong Kong and London and all of the cities in the world where her law firm had a physical presence. And she didn't have a budget because she makes a lot of money. So she could live in a really cool apartment in Kensington and not have to worry about it and be like a 15-minute commute to her office if she had to go in there. So these are just 2 examples. And then as Johnny mentioned, I highlighted Bulgaria here because actually Johnny helped me decide to go to Bulgaria because I was looking for a place that was close to Greece, which is where we were when we were deciding where to go next. And it had a low cost of living, it had a good co-working space and community, and it had really fast internet and a healthy lifestyle. And we chose Bansko, Bulgaria because it was specifically the off season. So we knew it wouldn't be crowded like it is in February during the peak of ski season. And then you can also, for any of you guys like geography nerds, you can start to assess countries based on other factors like cost of living or climate, or of course the time of year, the high season, the low season, and even nomad hotspots. So just a few examples, like if you only want to go somewhere that's $1,000 a month or less, you can discard a lot of countries in the world and just go to someplace like Peru, or Poland, or Johnny's favorite place, Ukraine, Vietnam. And then, of course, some of these countries, like, for example, Canada, I have Vancouver as a high cost of living destination, and Toronto is another one. But you can go to the same country and find like a border town or a small town that has the same cost of living as Thailand. So think about the differences in the towns and cities in one country, and you can have a completely different experience in downtown Toronto versus Windsor, Canada, for example. And then, of course, nomad hotspots. If you want to go to a place with a lot of other nomads, you can just pick off that list. Well, these are just some examples, like Bali and Lisbon in Thailand. So this is the fun part. And then, finally, step 5, we're at housing. So what do most people do? Like, have you guys ever gotten into an Airbnb hole where you like look up and it's been 3 hours and you're like, what was I doing again? Yeah, so we're gonna avoid that because if you know what type of housing you're looking for, then you can know where you're gonna find it. So I broke the housing into 3 categories. A private dwelling, so like an Airbnb or a flip key apartment or something like that. A shared dwelling, which can be with just normal people or other digital nomads as well. And then co-living or retreats, which is typically all remote workers or people on sabbatical or other digital nomads. So if you want a shared dwelling, then maybe you can look at Airbnb with different filters, or you can look at Craigslist and try to find a roommate or something like that. And then if you're doing co-living or retreats, you might think, well, I don't even need this relocation plan because someone's going to do everything for me. But you want to be looking at just the companies that provide these retreats. But if you've already done the other steps, then you're going to know which provider has a retreat that's going to be the best fit for your needs. So you guys will have a different experience if you go live at a building like Rome that's kind of independent and you can do, kind of have your own flow and your own lifestyle versus if you're on a program with more structure like Remote Year. And if you've gone through all of the steps in this relocation process and then you get to your co-living or your retreat environment, whether you're doing like a 2-week program or a 1-year program, your brain is going to subconsciously realize if it's a good fit or not, because you've already built your own foundation of what your expectations for the location-independent lifestyle are. And now it's on to the boring part, which is all of the nuts and bolts of the relocation. So the logistics, travel reservations, insurance, getting all of your doctor's appointments and checkups done before you leave, making sure that your debit cards and your credit cards and your bank accounts are going to be functional no matter where you go, having all your documents in order, getting rid of your stuff or storing it, and then packing. And I still pack too much, but what you need, what you don't. And then the last 2, so bucket list. When I went to Bulgaria, I was going to work, as Johnny likes to call it, like in work mode or maintenance mode. But I knew there were a few things that I definitely wanted to do. And one of them was take the train to Plovdiv, which is a little cool historical town. So if there's something that you want to do in the destination that you're going to, just go ahead and make that part of your list so that you don't get too caught up in work or social stuff and forget why you went there in the first place. And then community. This is a huge topic. Digital nomads are notorious for feeling lonely. So there are steps that you can take in the relocation process to kind of start integrating and becoming a part of a community before you even get to that place. So for example, last year I went to Munich for Oktoberfest, and I didn't think I knew anyone there, but I realized I did. But I also realized that through joining Facebook groups and meetups, and Internations is a good website of expats all around the world, and you can actually see what types of social activities or things are going on before you get there. So I ended up going to a big dinner with like beer and stuff like that with people from like 30 different countries around the world, and it just helps you integrate and feel like part of your new destination. And then the next step is cross-cultural training. So along with community and integration and feeling at home. So remember that the main reasons that people fail long-term in the lifestyle is when they don't integrate properly, and as well, if you're a corporate executive, those people have a tough time adjusting as well. So at the end, I'll give you guys some resources on how you can do your own sort of cross-cultural training. And this is a part that's very ignored in the discussions about becoming a digital nomad, because not many people are familiar with global mobility and corporate relocation, but it's a really important piece, and I think it's the reason why people struggle long term. So to prove that, this is actually a scientific graph, and I put the actual graph in the top left, and then I expanded it here so we can go through each step. And this is the U curve of adjustment when you get to a destination. And the timeline at the bottom is like anywhere from 1 to 2 years. So it can take 1 to 2 years once you get to a place to actually adjust and get to the mastery level stage. Now, if you're going someplace for 1 week or 1 month, then that presents a bit of a challenge. But just being aware that these are actual scientifically proven stages of adjustment that every human being goes through can help you keep that as a point of reference so that you don't think that you're going crazy once you get there. So the first stage is the honeymoon phase, which is the best part because you're like, oh, why didn't I do this before? Life is great. I love living in Bali, and like, I should have done this 10 years ago. And then you get into the culture shock phase, and then finally into the adjustment phase where you're like, okay, well, I think I got this now. And then mastery, where 1 or 2 years in, you're finally feeling like you're part of the community. And then I also added a 5th step, which is not on the original curve, which is repatriation, another word that we talked about at the beginning, because what is the exit strategy of being a digital nomad? Like, what do you do at the end? I think a lot of people go out into the world and they start their location-independent journey, but then a few years in, they just start to feel lost and they're not sure where to go. So they're probably just in somewhere around this stage between steps 3 and 5, where they're not really sure what to do next. And this can take up a lot of time and attention out of your life and your business. So I put a question mark at the end because you guys are part, and I as well, we're part of the first generation of digital nomads. So there's not really a clear end game for like, what do you do after you've been a digital nomad for 5 years or 15 years? Do you go home? Do you make a new home? Do you just keep traveling? So as you get older and as you get through different life phases, this is something to keep in mind. So even if you don't know what your exit strategy is, just knowing that you're going to have different feelings as you spend more time in different places, or even if you're not traveling and you might need a change. So just to be cognizant of that. And this is a graph that this woman, Carol, made, bless her, because it's hilarious. This is the actual culture shock graph, the non-scientific one. And can anyone relate to this if you've been traveling? So it's not typically a U-curve in real life. It can feel like you're bipolar. And if you guys follow a lot of digital nomads on social media, then once you know that this exists, now it's going to be a lot clearer what's going on behind the scenes, because based on their Instagram posts or their YouTube videos, you'll know if they're in like this top part or down here. And you might hear them say things like, oh, the digital nomad lifestyle is a scam, it's not sustainable, blah, 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 and they're just over here, so it's fine. It'll get better again. So what is your exit strategy? You don't have to answer right now, but just keep it in mind. There's a quote, there's a quote that I really like, and I'm not sure who made it, but when stability seems to be beckoning you home, it is often wise to heed the call. So when you start to feel inside that something is not particularly right, don't just smile and like grin and bear it. Like, you may need to take a step back and reassess what your next relocation move is going to be. And of course, home can be wherever we are. Home can be where, what we make of it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be where you were born or where you're, currently traveling. So what did I tell you guys not to do? Or what did I not include in the 8 steps of the relocation? First and foremost, I didn't say read the internet for 3 years, right? Because that's not very productive. And I think a lot of digital nomads who are really smart and very independent and very wise and good business people, they tend to have this like blank when it comes to traveling, where they don't count the time that they spend researching travel or planning their own travel as any sort of business expense or opportunity cost. So people who are making 5-6 figures a month don't have a problem spending 20 or 30 hours looking at houses on Airbnb. And I think that that's kind of a waste of time and money. So if you're going to do all of the things that we like to do, which is like look around in forums and Facebook groups and things like that, just keep in mind that it can be a black hole. And I like to put that at the end of the process. So instead of starting out just reading all of Nomad List in like 200 countries in the world, go through all of the other steps, or at least like the first 5 or 6, before you start just browsing around. And, like in Facebook groups, people are always asking, where should I move? And even though the people who answer you might have the best intentions, if you think back to the first, second, and third steps, they don't know that information about you. So they don't know who you are as a person. They don't know what your budget is. They don't know what time of day you work the best and you're most productive. They don't know what's required in your business to be successful. And they don't know what's on your bucket list. So they might tell you what works for them, but now you're equipped with these steps to know what's going to work for you and to be able to absorb that information through your own lens. So my last tip here is that it's about you guys. You're in such a fortunate position to be able to go out and become a digital nomad. I mean, this is like unprecedented in the history of the world. So just again, make it about yourself. Like, go ahead and be selfish about it. If you have an idea of something that you want to do, that's yours to do. So don't start taking on the dreams and ideas of other digital nomads. Like, just do you. And just a few other tips. So on that cultural awareness and integration note, there's a cool website called Hofstede's 6 Dimensions, where you can take a quiz for $39, and it will actually, like, this is based on science as well, it's just not some random website. It will actually give you a list of countries where you might be able to adapt better. So you can use this as a strategy to pick places where you're going to adapt faster. Or if you're struggling and you're in a country where you're not happy, maybe you can take a look at that and see what countries it suggests to you and make some changes. Actually, Teleport is another website where you can couple the results of Hofstede's with this one, and you can put in a few answers to a few questions, and it will give you a list of all the countries and cities in the world that are ranked that are most compatible with your personality. So that's pretty cool as well, and with your goals and budget. Expatistan is good for figuring out how much things cost and creating your own budget, because remember, you're your own CFO. And then the art of planning. Digital nomads are notorious for planning too much or not enough. I've had so many clients that have basically planned out a whole year in advance, so I don't recommend doing that, and I don't recommend just getting a one-way ticket to Bali and hoping for the best. So somewhere in between. And then Murphy's Law, just remember that things are going to go wrong no matter how much preparation you have, so you won't be able to expect it, but it will happen at some point. So yeah, thank you guys. I hope that this was helpful for you and that you can just have the world as your oyster there and go out into the planet and do your thing. If you'd like to connect with me on social media, I'm Traveling with Kristin on all of the platforms, and also on YouTube. I do a weekly show called Digital Nomad TV, where we do travel videos or digital nomad videos and topics and live streams, and that's super fun. And also I have a Facebook group if you want to chat more. It's called Long-Term Digital Nomad Success, and we also do a weekly live stream in there. And you can also pre-order this book that I have coming out, hopefully by December, called Digital Nomad 101, where you'll get a lot more detail about the different phases of preparing to become a digital nomad, how to sustain it long-term, and what to do when you get to the end or the later parts of your journey. So thank you.